Welcome to the Jira Life, the place to find news, events, and interviews with the Atlassian community's movers and shakers. Join our hosts, Alex, Dr. Jira Ortiz, and Rodney, the Jira Guy Nissen, as well as the Jira Amigos in the Peanut Gallery, as we sit down and discuss the latest going on in the Atlassian ecosystem. Because we didn't choose the Jira Life, the Jira Life chose us.
I really got to turn that off. I am so sorry for that. Spoilers, this is the Jira Life. We have a weekly podcast where we talk about all things Atlassian, and that's our little intro song. So if you're new and you've never heard of the Jira Life, that's what that was all about. I did not intend to do that at all, so I apologize for that. There's new settings in our streaming tools, and you can do all kinds of crazy things. And yeah, I got to talk to my producer and my co-host to get that turned off, because these are not technically sponsored by Revise at all, and these are not part of the Jira Life, because that's the podcast. That's like a whole different thing that we do on the side. So again, apologies for that. But with that said, we're just going to jump into it. Today, we're going to be talking about Jira Advanced Roadmaps, aka plans. And I do put it in parentheses because forever in my heart, it's going to be the jar. But Atlassian has it as a plan. So it's there as in parentheses. But we're going to just jump into Advanced Roadmaps, and I'll kind of start with my slides here, and then we're going to dive deeper into what the plans are, how you take advantage of them, and how you can how you can really leverage the power of the jar. So I'm gonna call it a jar going forward. And so thank you all for the intro. Yeah. So again, if you've never seen the Jira Live, that's the intro for our podcast. It's just our settings are set up so that it automatically plays when I'm in this particular part of the studio. So definitely check out the Jira Live if you like that intro, because usually there's a whole lot more of exciting information happening after that intro. But again, thank you again for the warm. I made a mistake and you guys are okay with it. Again, not trying to push anything on you all, but that's kind of why I'm apologizing. All right. My name's Alex, and we're going to be covering the jars. So let's talk about what we're going to be covering, though. So we have a very unique opportunity. So it's the beginning of a quarter-ish, kind of. We're 15 days into a new quarter, and I use an Atlassian instance that's provided to community leaders, which I am one of. And so I have a brand new Jira. And today we're going to be like setting things up from the beginning. So this is kind of a bit of a unique case where I don't get to always create or start from a brand new Jira. I've logged in for the first time. So things might not even work. But anyways, we're going to set it all up brand new. And I'm going to really explain the why and the how things are working, because since I have this unique opportunity to really start at the beginning, we're just going to get into it, right? And so we'll talk about creating that first jar. We'll talk about the timeline, the summary, and some plan settings that you need to know. And then really just explain to you how and why these things are important, which I think is why you're here. But before we do, just to give you a little credibility as to who I am, why you're here, and why you should listen to me. My name's Alex, as I mentioned at the beginning. I am a co-host for the Jira Life, this is the YouTube channel that we are in right now. So if you haven't subscribed to this channel, and if you really like that intro, go ahead and smash that like button right now, because it does help us grow this community that we're building here. And if you've ever been looking for a home, if you've been looking for a place to really collaborate and just feel like you're part of something bigger, right? Jira is just a tool that we use, but there really is a huge community centered around the Atlassian ecosystem. And it's a really awesome community that my co-host and I, Rodney Nissen, and myself, you probably know him as the Jira Guy from thejiraguy.com. But myself and Rodney, we've been building this thing along with my wife and our producer, Bob. We've been building this awesome community where we talk about all things Atlassian, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We usually have a guest that we come and talk about everything Atlassian. So definitely subscribe and come back on Thursday. We stream every single Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So if you're looking for something cool, again, just to go beyond just using this tool for work, like there really is this really awesome non-work, a lot more personable part of Jira, and the Jira Life is where it happens. Now, I'm working on taking the ACP 120. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in about 3 to 4 weeks, I have a date scheduled for, I believe, November 9th. I will have my ACP 120. I currently have the ACP 520. And once I have those two, I'm going to be working on the 420 and then eventually the 620. I do plan on getting them all so I can have that coveted Atlassian certified expert that Atlassian is bringing back. But aside from that, I do have another YouTube channel Because if you've ever Googled a question on what is Jira or how to use Jira or anything Jira related, you might recognize my face. I have a YouTube channel, Ape Tech Tutorials, where I have over 800 videos on how to use the Atlassian tools. So if you scan that QR code there, it's going to take you to all the links of subscribing to this channel, subscribing to to Ape Tech. I also have a book. I have courses. I have so many resources. If you also need like one-on-one help, there's opportunities there as well. So make sure you check that out. We'll come back to the end. But with that said, let's just go into Jira. A lot of people usually ask me, hey, do we have slides? That's basically the end of it. We're going to be in Jira the rest of the time. And so just pay attention and watch this on replay if you need to. But yeah, we're going to basically be in Jira the rest of the remainder of the time, working with our advanced roadmap. So we're pretty much done with the slides until we come back at the end. All right. So yes, I am more braver than I haven't passed it yet, Aaron. So let me go and try to take it. But I've been studying. We're almost done here on the Jira Life as well. If you're interested, we do have the entire study guide for the ACP 120. We're about 95% complete, and we have 2 more sessions tomorrow and Friday to finish up that study guide. So go check out the playlist for ACP 120 if you're interested. We've been streaming for like the last month and a half on just studying for it. So if it's something of interest, either join us for the last 2 sessions or go back and look at the other, 13 videos that we've published so far. So that's a little side spiel on the ACP 120. All right, so we're here to talk about JAR. So let me start off with what is the JAR? What is the Jira Advanced Roadmap? So I like to explain it this way. And I'm going to kind of hide my screen here for a second so we can focus on this. So Jira has projects, right? So we have company managed projects, we have team managed projects, we have some work management projects, we have service management projects, we have just Jira software projects, right? And so you have all these projects that are inside your Jira. Well, each of those projects is designed to kind of be like its own standalone entity, right? I like to call these Jira projects a house. So if you think of each project that you have in your Jira instance as an individual house, then you have a pretty good understanding of what a project is. But what is a plan? Well, I like to think of the plan as kind of like a bird's eye view, right? If you're using Google Maps, right, and you're looking at just bird's eye view of like a neighborhood, then that's essentially what the plan is. It lets you either bring in data from one project, so you can like look at the project more holistically, or you can pull in multiple projects. So you can bring in like an entire neighborhood worth of Jira projects and see everything holistically. So it's a very, very powerful view inside of Jira that allows you to, again, have that bird's eye view, have that 30,000 foot view so you can look down and go, I see what everything, right? I see it all. I see all the stories, all the tasks, all the bugs, everything, all the assignees, all the sprints, all the releases, not just for one project, but for a multitude of projects. And that's really where it shines. That's really where we're going to get the most bang for our buck. And that's kind of what we're going to lead up to today. But Jira Advanced Roadmaps do work for just one project, right? So if you wanted to have a more holistic view of just one project, that's totally cool as well. But you're going to get the most benefit when you're doing like a cross-functional type of plan, right? When you have to get the marketing team, the design team, the developer team, and the testers all in sync, right? So if you got to coordinate all these different teams, all these different entities so that they are all aligned on one vision, on one plan, then that's where the plan, the advanced roadmap, is really going to come and shine, right? So that's basically what the JAR is. Now, little spoilers. This works for Jira Premium and Jira Enterprise. If you are not in the cloud, Premium, or Enterprise, you're not going to have the ability to use the JAR. So if you're on free or standard in the cloud, you're out of luck. Fortunately, Data Center, there's a little bit of hope. Data Center does have the JAR. It's just called a little bit differently. I think you call them roadmaps or something like that. And so that everything that I'm going to be covering should apply over there. But just keep in mind that I'm going to be focused on Jira Premium, specifically Jira Cloud Premium, because that's the version of Jira that I have. But if you're on Enterprise or on Cloud Premium, it's the same experience. It's just really the data center folks that just got to shift a little bit. Now, if you are on free or standard, I do recommend that you upgrade to that 30-day free trial. And in fact, as long as you don't put your credit card information, you should be able to upgrade to 30 days free, cancel it, and then come back. And so you can like infinitely have the premium, but you're going to definitely want to be on premium to do this. Now, how do you know if you're on premium? Well, it's really easy. So to create a plan, Jira has a plan section here in the navigation. And so you simply got to click on it right here. And if you are not on premium or enterprise, you're going to be greeted with a nice little marketing bubble that says, hi, welcome to the plans. It's cool that you're interested in, but if you want it, you're going to have to pay for it. And so you'll have like an upgrade button. If you see what I see, or you see existing plans already, then really good news, because we're ready. You are on premium, you are on the right version of everything, and we're ready to create a plan. And so with that said, we're going to jump in and create our very first plan, and we're going to kind of Russian doll this, right? We're going to start very small, very basic, and we're just going to keep building until we have a pretty in-depth, sophisticated plan. I'm going to show you kind of like the ins and outs on how all this works. So we're going to start off, again, super simple. And if you're following along at home, all you got to do is click on create a plan, and we're going to give it a name. Now, this is usually where most folks make their very first mistake. When you're creating your plan, you don't want to think small. You don't want to think your Jira project. Heck, you don't even want to think your Jira board. You want to think bigger, because like as I mentioned a few minutes ago, right, the jar is really great from a holistic perspective. And if you're really just trying to make a jar for just one team or one project or one board, that's cool. You can do that, and you can think small in that case. But you're doing yourself a disservice. You're using like 20% of the capacity here, right? And so if you really want to take advantage of your jar, you want to think bigger. So when you're creating your plan, don't think of, again, the mobile team. Don't think of like the marketing team. Think of the application you're building. Think of the product that you're building, right? And so in this particular case, let's just build like a time tracking plan, right? So we're gonna be creating an app that lets us do some sort of time tracking, right? So I'm gonna do time tracking app plan, all right? And then again, because I'm gonna be pulling in data from multiple teams, not just one team. And okay, great, Jasper, thank you so much. I don't have access to data center all that much, so I know the last time I was in there was called Roadmap, so it's good to see that Atlassian at least does some updates. So that's really good news there. So thank you for letting me know. But anyways, so again, don't think very small. Don't call this like don't call this like the developer plan, right? Because you can definitely like have a whole 50,000 foot view of the developers, but you're really going to get your best bang for your buck when you look at the whole app. So you have your marketing, your design, your functional testing, your all kinds of teams, right? Everybody that has to come together to create the app. This is where we're gonna shine. So again, that's when it comes to naming your plan. Number two, you got to determine access. Here you want to be very careful, because access, there's some additional settings we can take a look at in a second here. And yes, claim this stream will be made available. It's on our Jira Life. So this is why, again, subscribe to the Jira Life if you haven't already, so you can go back. And in fact, you can not only see this stream, but you can see all the other streams from all the other community-led trainings that I do. They're all hosted here on this channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and go check out all of our videos. All right. So access. On the access, very important that you determine. You really only have two options. You can either leave it open or private. Now, there's some other settings that, again, we'll take a look in a second about what you can do with read-only and things of that nature. But for the most part, if you leave it open, then anybody will be able to go into your plan. And if they have the permissions in your Jira projects to edit, create, delete, then they'll have the same power in your plan. So if you have good security and good permissions on your project, then you don't have to worry about anything. But if you don't, if you're just using the defaults where Jira is open to everything and open to everyone, you might want to consider going private so that people don't mess with your data. Because one of the things that you do got to know, that I'm going to talk about in a second, is the changes in your plan do get pushed into Jira. So the changes, the assignees, right? If you change the start date, the due date of something, it will reflect eventually inside your Jira issue. So you want to be careful with who's moving data around, because it can cause some confusion. So I'm going to leave it open for now because I'm a team of one, but you ideally want to manage that as well. And data center jar screams when there's more than 5,000 issues. Yes, so we'll talk about that, Mikolaj. Unfortunately, Atlassian got rid of some very key part of the UI, which I'm going to complain about in just a second here. But you bring up a very good point, that you're kind of getting ahead of me, because the next thing that we're going to talk about is this add work to your plan. So I'm going to see if I can actually make this a little bit bigger by me. Yeah, there we go. So you add work to your plan. You have a couple of options, right? Because at this point, all we're creating is an empty shell that's open. But what do we put in the shell? Well, this is where we're going to define the data. We're going to define which project, board, or filter we're going to utilize to pull data into our plan. And so my recommendation is always to use the project. That's my number one advice, because the project is going to bring all the issues in a particular project. And you want to bring in as many issues as possible. That's usually the best policy here. So when you select project, you're going to be able to pick, when you select project, oh boy. Remember I told you guys we might have some problems? This is a brand new Jira. And so hopefully this works. Let me try that again. That I was not expecting. Okay, you know what? I just need to type in the name. Okay, time tracking app plan. Okay, sorry about that. I was expecting to be able to see more stuff, but again, your mileage is going to vary here because it's the first time that I have this Jira set up. So, anyways, I would do the project because you're going to bring all the issues. Now, before about 6 months ago, Atlassian up here in this top right corner used to tell me how many issues were in that project or were going to be visible. Today, you're taking I don't know why Atlassian would get rid of that, because there is a hard ceiling of 5,000 issues. So if you start bringing in more projects and you have multiple issues that have like thousands and thousands and thousands of issues, you're going to hit that 5,000 limit real quick. So unfortunately, I don't know why Atlassian removed it. We got Atlassian officially removed the focus from issue as a primary thing in projects on the latest summit. Yeah, they've removed issue, but you're still tracking work. You're still going to track the things that you got to bring in. So whether you want to call it an issue or a thing, you still got things. So anyways, you used to have a number though that used to tell you how many things you were bringing in, because we have a hard limit of 5,000. But right now you're just going to have to take a guess. But I will show you there is a workaround. I'll show you that in a minute as well. Now, to keep things simple, we're going to leave it at one project, but you do have other options. You have the board. Now, I don't recommend the board, but you can use the board because a lot of people usually interchange board with project, especially if you're not creating multiple boards in a project, then board and project are interchangeable. But just know that your boards can have a filter. So they can usually have like a subset of data. So sometimes you might be looking for issues or things, and you're going to be like, I can't find that epic, or I can't find that story, or I can't find that bug. I don't know where it's at. Well, it's because your issue sources might not included it, right? So if your board intentionally kicks out all your bugs and there's no bugs, well, you're never going to see bugs. And so since you can't always trust that you know what the board filter is, it makes it a little bit more challenging. So for that reason, I like to bring in the project. Now, worst case scenario is you bring in the filter. Now, this bites you in the butt way more than it helps. Most of the time when I'm helping somebody because they ran into a problem, they're like, hey, I can't see any initiatives, or I can't see any of my epics. I'm like, well, yeah, because your filter is just for stories, right? And so if you're using filters, you are going to be at the biggest loss, because you're going to think you're clever by like specifically zooming in on a subset of data, but it kind of breaks the whole thing. So I would avoid filters at all costs unless you really, really know what you're doing there with your filters. So Vlado says, just a thought and a guess, that's something else is going to change. Yeah, everything's always changing in Juraville. If there's one constant you can always trust, and that is change. But yeah, good point on the projects. Yeah, again, I always use the analogy of like a good haircut. It's so much easier to cut a little bit of hair off, but once you cut the hair off, you're not putting it back on. So it's kind of the same thing. Like if you don't pull in those issues, the plan's going to be blinded to that, and you won't be able to find those issues. So you're going to have to adjust your plan here. Now, again, just because we're having fun here, we're just going to go in and essentially bring in a project. This is my mobile dev team. I actually don't know if I'm picking the right one. I think I am. My scroll bar does not work on my mouse very much anymore. But anyways, I'm going to hit the create button. And now that I've hit the create button, I'm going to hit skip tour because you're with the expert. And here is our plan. Now, again, as I said at the beginning, this is the most basic way of using your plan, because, see, I even picked the wrong type, because what I just brought in right now was a product discovery project. So we don't want that. We want the mobile dev. So I'm actually going to go into my plan. So everybody just kind of close your eyes for 1 second. I made a mistake. I picked the wrong project. Maybe because I have a bunch of ones that are all named the same. But here we go. I fixed it. Now, here's one little thing that I want to show you. Remember how earlier I was complaining about how you don't know how many issues are being brought into your plan? Check this out. So once you make your plan, if you go to plan settings and you go to issue sources, up here, it'll tell you how many issues are in your plan. This used to be on that main screen, so you knew if you were bringing in too many issues or not. And so luckily, we could still at least see it. You just got to go hunting for it. Victoria says, if I start with the board, can I go back and change it to a project? Yeah, so basically what I just did, Victoria, right? So you can come in here and change it. So I just picked the wrong project. So you just have to manipulate your data from here. So all you got to do is go to your plan settings, right? Go to issue sources, and then you're going to be able to change it from a project to a board, or from a board to a project, whatever you want to do there. So it's going to let you change it. So very, very easy. And of course, you can always see, you can be able to see how many issues are in that plan here, which again, that number should be when you're creating it, so you don't hit that hard limit of 5,000. All right. So with that said, little sidebar, but we're good. We're back, right? So now we have our plan. So what exactly are we looking at? Well, the timeline here. So this is where Atlassian has an identity crisis with this, right? Because for me, because I'm a little bit older and I've been using this stuff for a while, these are forever going to be the Jira Advanced Roadmaps, because that's what they used to be called. They used to be called Advanced Roadmaps, and they were Jira's Advanced Roadmaps, hence my jar, right? But then Atlassian rebranded everything to a timeline. And so we have a timeline here, but then not everything works off the timeline. So it's very confusing. So we have timelines, we have plans, and we have jars, advanced roadmaps. It's all interchangeable. It all means the same thing at the end of the day. But here we are. This is the timeline view. And this timeline view, if I do a little bit of a collapse here, if I go into timeline view over here, this timeline view should look very, very similar, very, very similar to a timeline view that I'm going to show you in just a minute, right? And so all this timeline view is basically takes all your issues, whether that's an epic, a story, a task, a bug, a subtask. It shows you the status, and then it shows you the dates. Now keep in mind that I am in this timeline view. I originally was in this list view, but I clicked on timeline up here. And this is how I end up with this timeline view. Now this is very important, because if I go into the Jira project that I pulled in, right? So if you remember, I'm working off my marketing dev one. There's a timeline here too, right? There's a timeline here. And as you can see, my timeline's empty, right? and the reason why we like the advanced timeline is because this timeline here is so basic, right? This timeline that's built into Jira, Scrum, and Kanban boards that everybody gets for free, whether you're on free, standard, premium, or enterprise versions of Jira, this timeline here really only works off the epics and the stories. You can't see the whole hierarchy. And if you try to talk, right, if you try to get like 2 or 3 projects to kind of show up on one timeline, this thing cripples and dies, right? It doesn't work. So that advanced timeline is the only way of seeing cross-project issues, right? And so that's very, very important for me to tell you, because I just want to let you know that at first, these should look very similar, with the exception that we're going to work off of an epic. Now, we don't have any epics today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an epic so you can start appreciating what this timeline looks like and how it works. So I'm going to go into my Jira project. I'm in the basic timeline, okay? I'm in just the regular, plain vanilla timeline that everybody has. And I'm just going to click on this create epic, right? And I'm going to say for this app, right, ability to enter, for a user to enter time, right? And so that's just an epic that I'm going to create. And you can see that this issue was created, but it's not currently visible because it doesn't match my board filter. And this is where you start running into some problems, right? So for some reason, this particular board is only for like Baltimore projects. And then there's a Cowboys one. And so I can try to see if the Cowboys one brings it, but here it is, right? So in this particular board, this is why, again, the boards can be confusing, because you can have filters on your boards that might not just bring in all the data. So if I were to bring the whole project, it should bring everything in theoretically. And so you can see here how this particular view here has epics already, and there's dates. So you may be asking yourself, well, why don't we see that inside of our timeline, inside of our jar? Well, the reason is because when you first set it up, you got to go do some configurations. And so here are some of the configurations you want to do. Number one, you obviously want to bring in the issues. We already did that, right? And so that's kind of done. But number two is you want to click on this filters button right here, and you want to make sure that your from and your to are appropriate to what you're trying to achieve. Now, I want to see from the epic all the way down to the subtasks. So I want to see epics, stories, and subtasks. And when you change that, when they change that filter, you're going to see, I'm going to collapse this part, right? You're going to see that minus the color, these two look very, very similar, right? And so I can actually make the colors look a little bit closer by clicking on view settings, and I can do my color by epic. And you can see that my colors now look pretty much exactly the same. I think the jar has them a little bit more pastel looking, but you see how these are basically the exact same thing, okay? And so this is how we're just getting our timeline, right? We're just doing our configurations to get our advanced roadmap to work better. Now, what's great about this, right, is when I expand this very first epic, you're going to see that I have all the stories. Now, if I go to the regular timeline and I expand that epic, you're going to see that I also have all those timelines or all those stories as well. There's a couple of differences, though, right? A couple of differences that you got to know. One, these, well, we'll get into that in a minute, right? The biggest difference, though, between this one and this basic timeline and this advanced timeline is watch what happens when I add a subtask. If I create a subtask for this story, right? So if I open up mobile 12 and I create a subtask right here, and I'm going to go, this is my subtask, and I hit create, right? All we're going to get is a tiny little icon that you're probably going to have to zoom in here, right? Let me hit refresh real quick. There's a tiny little icon right here that looks kind of like an org chart that tells me, hey, this particular story has a subtask, has a child. Over here, when I hit refresh on my advanced roadmap, I'm not going to get a little icon. I'm going to get another caret, and I can actually expand it and see that subtask. And this right here, my friends, is the power of the jar, right? Because instead of just being able to see the epic and the story and then the dates, over here, I can see the epic, the story, and the subtask, and the dates, and then whatever fields I want. So the jar is way, way more powerful. Way, way more powerful. Now, what is really cool as well is that as I update anything inside of Jira, right? So let's go to the epic that I made earlier, right? If I add a child down here and go story 1 and I do story 2, right? And then if I add dates, I'm going to just add some dates here that look like that, right? By me adding the date, adding those stories, I go back to my plan over here. Notice how it's empty. There's no dates here. This one doesn't have any children. But when I hit refresh, all those changes that I just made, that those 44 dates that I added, 44 day duration that I added, and those 2 stories, they're immediately reflected in the jar. Granted, I had to hit refresh, but that data is now reflected in there. But watch this. If I take this epic and I re-rank it, if I move it up to the top, okay, you're going to get this nice little pop-up that says, hey, your changes are not saved. What does that mean? Well, that means that if I go back to my plan and I hit if I go back to my just Jira project and I hit refresh, nothing happened, because any changes, right? So if you folks are taking, if you're taking notes, any changes you do here, right? Any changes you do in the jar, they do not automatically get reflected in Jira. You have to click this unsaved changes button up here. It's going to give you a summary view of all the changes. And in fact, you're going to be able to see changes that you made, changes that other people have made, and you get to pick which changes you want to accept or not accept. But once you pick what you want, you hit that save button, and now, see how mobile 40 is at the top? Now when I hit refresh, see how it's right at the bottom? When I hit refresh, that mobile 40 is at the top. And you might be wondering, like, well, Alex, this is not cool. Like, what's the importance of this? Well, might not be important to you right now, but things get way more interesting. Check this out. If I go to my projects, and if I go to another company managed software, I have this one right here, the mobile program, right? If I pull that project in too, right? So I'm going to go to my issue sources and I'm going to bring in another project. I'm going to bring in mobile program. And you know what? Just for fun, we're going to bring in the platform one as well. Right. So we're going to bring in 3 projects. We now have 306 issues. Okay. So if I go back to my plan and if I'm in my timeline view, you're going to see that I have a lot of epics. I have an epic for the MP, I have epics for the platform, and I have epics for the mobile. And so now the real world situation is I have 3 teams and I have to coordinate their priorities. So moving these around and going, okay, we're going to work on this first, move it to the top. Then we want to work on this one. And then we want to work on this one. Now you have one place where for multiple teams, you can set those priorities, right? And you have, instead of going through 3 different Jira projects, because what I just did to see 3 epics under one view like this from 3 different projects, it's impossible to do inside of Jira. It's just, there's no way to do it. If you try to manipulate your board filter to include the other 2 projects so you can see them in one place, you're not gonna be able to see that. So trying to do like cross team prioritization is impossible without something like the jar. Now I'm gonna take a 5-second here to look at some questions here. So Mikolaj says, my colleagues have debates around Jira versus structure. I'll give you my 2 cents, not that you're asking, but I'll give you my 2 cents. So the reason why you would go with the jar is if you're on the premium version of Jira already, you might as well use the jar because you get a lot with the premium, right? In fact, Atlassian is pushing everything. All the cool stuff is literally on premium or enterprise only. And so like things like Atlassian Intelligence, things like having a sandbox, things like being able to archive a project, things like having way, way more automation rules, right? And things like the jar, those are premium only features. So if you are trying to take advantage of having any of those things that I just called out, then it makes most sense to just go to the premium version of Jira. You're going to double your bill, but you also get a lot of more functionality. Now, if you're like, hey, well, we're kind of budget friendly or focused and we don't really want to double our bill, well, that's where structure is going to come into play. Because if you're saying like, hey, I'm okay with having just 1,000 automation rules. I'm okay with not having a sandbox. I'm okay with not being able to archive projects. I'm okay with not being able to use Atlassian Intelligence. I'm okay without having to use the jar. And the list goes on, right? There's so many more things that you get when you're on premium. If you're okay to say, nope, I don't need any of that, then I would recommend go pay for something like structure because it's just going to be a smaller cost. You're going to pay $2, $3, $4, whatever they charge per user, as opposed to 2x in your bill. So that would be my 2 cents as to why we would go jar versus structure. Vlado says jar is for non-jar experts that haven't mastered JQL and to have a better overview. I don't know that I would argue that. I don't know that would be my argument because I'm going to show you something really, really cool that you just don't get to see even if you were great at JQL, you just don't get to see this, right? So this is really the most beneficial way of viewing all your work because JQL, there's no amount of JQL in the world that's going to give you the insight that a jar can provide. So don't necessarily agree with that. Don't you have a formula columns in jar? I don't think so. I've never seen one. But if anybody knows of one, let me know. But I've never seen any formulas. Okay. So check this out, folks. Like, so this is the jar, right? So this is kind of where it starts making more sense. When you can pull in epics and stories from a bunch of different projects, this is where we can start really, really going to town and having a holistic view. But it gets better, right? It gets so much better. I'm going to show you something basic, and then we're going to go and do something a little bit more advanced. So check this out. Let's just say that this platform team, you see all the stories that the platform team has? They have a lot of stories, right? But let's just say that this particular epic for this particular team or platform team, they need to also have this a story that belongs to the mobile team. So how do you do that, right? Well, in regular Jira, you can. I mean, you can definitely do this, but it works backwards if you don't have the jar. And so basically what I'm trying to say is what happens if this particular story that belongs to the mobile team, or let's just create a new story. what if for commerce, we need help from the two other teams? Well, in the jar, I can simply click this button, click the create story, and notice that by default, it's going to prompt me to create a story for platform, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do instead is I want to create a story for the mobile dev team. And I'm going to say build commerce UI, right? And I'm going to hit save there. And then I'm going to create one for the mobile program where it's like roll up commerce analytics, right? Just a couple of stories that belong to different teams. When I hit the save changes button, folks, this is super, super critical. If you're not paying attention, I'm going to go over this again for one more second here, because what I just did is something that I call not revolutionary, but so business oriented. So many companies work like this, right? It is very common where when you're building something for your team that you need help from other teams. And so how do you track that? Well, the jar lets us do that. It lets us capture not only the work for our team under this epic, but it lets us also start delegating work to other teams. This is powerful. This allows us to have one view, one unified view that allows us to see what all the other teams are working on. Very, very powerful. Jesper says, advanced web limitations, only one parent link anywhere, structure supports more parent. Yes. So this is an interesting limitation. I call it an opportunity. And Jesper, I'll throw this back on you. Why would you need two parents? Right? I think having a single parent is better. But again, those are my 2 cents. All right. But I think things you start muddying the waters. It's like having multiple assignees, in my opinion, right? When you have multiple parents or multiple assignees, things get very confusing really quickly. So I'm a big proponent on just keeping it simple. Having a single parent means you have a single owner, which means that one person or one team or one thing is taking responsibility for that thing, right? And this is key to making sure that accountability and that delivery actually happens. Because again, when you have multiple parents, you have multiple owners, multiple stakeholders, things start getting a little bit less accountability-ish, and people start not delivering on their commitments. So I'm a huge fan of having one owner, one parent that drives that. Okay, so this is how we have that there. Now, if you've never done this before, I'm about to blow your minds completely, right? So inside of Jira, when you're on the premium version of Jira, you'll notice that, well, what happens if we have to get a couple of epics to work together, right? What happens if we want to group 3 epics together? Well, you can't do that if you're on standard or free, but we can introduce something called like an initiative. And so this is going to be a little bit more Jira advanced roadmapping. Sorry, this is going to be a little bit more Jira administrator heavy. And if you're not an administrator, if you're not a Jira admin for your instance, you're going to have to talk to your Jira admin. But watch what you can do. You can click on this gear, you can go to issues, and you have all your issue types right here, right? But over here on the other side, we have something called a hierarchy. Again, this is really only modifiable if you're on premium or enterprise of Jira. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create another level. But before we can create another level, we got to go create the issue that we want. So if you're following like safe to a certain level, there's something called an initiative. This can be whatever you want. But I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new issue type called initiative. And this could be like, oops, I can't spell initiative. This can be something like project. It can be a program. It can be literally whatever you want. Just safe usually calls it initiative. Okay. So once I have that created, and I can't spell initiative, that initiative issue type exists. And so what I'm allowed to do over here is I can create a new level and call this initiative. And then I can select one or more issues to be at that level. So I'm just going to go to my eyes and select my initiative. And so now this is a global change. All of Jira is now impacted by this. But when I hit save changes, right, my epics will now respect that they can have a parent called an initiative. This is very, very powerful, right? And so what I can do here now is go into any epic and assign a new parent to it. This is not possible just a few minutes ago. And so let me show you what that looks like in action. I'm going to go into a project. I'm going to go back into my mobile dev project. And once I created the issue type and once I set the hierarchy, there's another step you got to do is you got to go into your project and under the issues for that project, somebody's got to own that initiative, right? This is again going back to Jesper's comment here. Is I'm a huge proponent of a single parent because somebody will own it, right? And so I'm going to deem, usually what I do with my teams is we have like an initiatives project that is kind of like governed by leadership or your directors or your stakeholders, right? And we put all the initiatives in there, and then we branch out to their individual team epics because the teams can then manage their epics down to the subtask. But the initiatives are usually high levels, right? They're above the epic, and they're usually a lot more strategic, right? And so I like to keep the initiatives separate. I like to have just a dedicated project just for the initiatives, but it doesn't really matter. You just got to put the initiative somewhere. So in this particular example, right, I'm going to go to my actions, edit my issue types, and I'm going to bring in the initiative issue type over here. Now, for some reason, my scroll just does not work on my mouse. Gotta fix my mouse. All right. So all I've done is I've taken it from the available to my current, and I'm going to hit save. And so this project now has the ability to create initiatives. Okay. Now we got to go make an initiative. You have a couple ways of doing this. You can hit the create button now and then pick initiative, right? Or you can go back to your timeline and you can hit the create issue, but you're going to notice that initiative is not there yet. And the reason that is because we got to go back to a step that we did earlier, which was we went to our filters. But because we've added an issue type above the epic, we got to move the bar. And I think I have to hit refresh here real quick because it needs to know that it got created. And so now I'm going to hit the from, and now you can see that I have initiative. So I'm going to click on that. And now everything going away. Uh-oh. That's not good. Right? And the reason that is because we don't have any initiative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my very first initiative here. Very first. Well, actually, let's call it, I don't know, create an awesome app, right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand my epics, if it lets me, and I'm going to drag and drop these epics to be children of this initiative. And this, my friends, is where we start getting very, very powerful because now I have one strategic initiative that a lot of teams are working on. I have a container for it. And then I have the respective epics or features that each team is independently going to go work on. And then they're going to go and break down all the stories and then the subtasks or whatever you need to do from there. And so from one view, for one issue, you have a holistic view of all of this. Again, technically in JQL, you can do this, right? There is a JQL for you that allows you to show all the children, all the descendants of an initiative, but you don't get this, appreciation for this hierarchy, okay? And the hierarchy, again, is a very powerful visual way of seeing all the work. Now I'm going to continue to blow your mind a little bit here. But before we do, while this is going, we have a question from MC. So jar time zone. Is there a way to set the time zone? Example, sprint ends at 11:30, but plans show 6:30 a.m. UTC. I don't think that there's a specific way of setting the time zones for the jar. I never seen one. I don't think there is one, but I do know that times are usually managed at the system level for Jira. So I would go check that. I would go check because it's my understanding that all your times are the same, right? Your time zones should be the same regardless of where you're at. So I would suspect that all your time zones are managed by the system level. So I would talk to your Jira admin to get that checked out. But I would assume that if your UTC if the jar is UTC, then the sprint should be UTC. Everything should be in the same time zone because it should all be controlled by Jira. All right. So now that we, let me go back to here. So now that we have an epic and we have now that we have an initiative and now that we have some epics and we have some stories, let me show you some really, really cool stuff that starts getting way, way more powerful. So number one, watch this. We can start setting up order of operations. So let's just say this epic is going to be done in 15 days. And then this epic is going to take another 15 days. Sorry, another 30 days. Right? And then this epic over here is going to take 15 days as well. Right? A couple of things that I want to highlight for you. Number one, you see this gray bar up here? Notice that this gray bar expands and contracts based on the children. This is a view setting. This is powerful. And then I don't know who said, was it Vlad? Yeah. So Vlad, I challenge you to show me this with JQL, right? Because with JQL, there's no way to know what that. I mean, there might be if you're using like script runner or whatnot, but that's expensive too, right? But there's no easy visual way of saying like, hey, look, because my children's dates are these, my initiative is going to be this much bigger. So that's really cool. So you can do your planning bottom up. So if you know the length of your stories, you know the length of your epics, then you're going to know the length of your initiative. You can also go top down where you set the dates for your initiative, and then everything else has to conform to those dates. But having this view setting where you roll up your dates right here, this is going to make it powerful so that as things slip on you, the parent is going to be slipping with you. That's very, very powerful. The other thing that you get from this view is that you can visualize the dependencies. So I can connect these particular epics together and go, hey, these two epics are dependent on this epic being finished. And this is something you don't simply get with just JQL or any other view, because inside of Jira, these dependencies, while you do get to see them, it's a field in there that says blocks and block 5. It's hard to appreciate the actual, like, what's blocking what. This view is way more powerful. And you even have a dependencies map over here, where if you go on this view, you're going to be able to see all those relationships and see if any days are being conflicted. So, like, for example, if I were to do this, if I were to move this guy to be over here, right? I'm creating a conflict. You see how these are red? Well, my dependencies is now going to tell me that we're blocking by a year. That doesn't make sense. But we're going to be blocking our stuff, right? And so those dates are being updated. I think we're really looking at this bottom one, right? So we're now going to be behind like 12 days because okay, sorry. Sorry, but I thought you were being very real there, right? And so anyway, so this dependencies is going to highlight pain points, big obvious problems that you can fix and shift your dates and shift expectations so that you can tell your teams like, hey, here's the problem, right? And this is the most powerful view because only in the jar can we coordinate the dependencies across teams. This is very, very real world. This is, again, where Jira Advanced Roadmap is worth every single penny, because when you're having to work with other teams, which is going to happen, it has to happen. I've never seen a team that is so siloed that they don't work with any other teams, right? But when you're working with other teams, having this view so you can see, I'm waiting on this team to finish their stuff so that this other team can get started. This is worth $1 million right here. Okay, we got a question. So what happens if a customer created the initiative under the epic in the hierarchy and later changes the hierarchy to an so this is a great question, Katharina. Jira is going to behave the way Jira is going to behave. And basically that means that if you didn't have the initiative earlier, right? So let's just change this up, right? So if we were to go over here to our issues and we were to change our hierarchy, and let's just delete, right? If we delete that initiative, oops, did I not delete it? I thought I deleted it. Let me remove it. Here we go. Save changes. Yep. Okay. So that initiative doesn't exist as a parent. And so when you don't have the initiative as a parent, notice these numbers. You see how the epic is level 1, these are level 0, and then my subtasks are level -1. Oops, doesn't show me here. Oops. You think I'd be using Jira forever, right? If I go to my subtask, you'll see -1. Here we go. See level -1. Well, if I go to my initiative, I can't spell initiative. Unbelievable. I one day will learn how to spell initiative. Notice that the hierarchy is level 0, and that is because I deleted it from being level 2, right? And so when I go back to my plan and I refresh this thing, it's going to break, right? It's going to break because my initiative is just now a child. It's a child of an epic. That's all it can be. And so there aren't any parent links per se, but you would have to go into that initiative, right? So I'd have to go into my project and find that initiative issue type where it's at, right here, right? And the parent can only be an epic. And so if I set it to be an epic, right, then then that's okay. Like you're just treating an initiative incorrectly. This I would never do this ever. But I'm going to show you what happens when we rebrand this, right? When we recategorize the initiative to be the parent, I would suspect that this relationship gets broken because it's not necessary anymore, right? Because we're violating that relationship. And so we're going to get rid of this relationship here, and we're going to and we're going to basically recreate it. Okay. Well, we're going to not recreate it, but we're going to fix it, right? Because this right here is the incorrect way of doing it. You would not, what you would never do is you would never create a link. Where's my links? You would never link an issue and do like parent. This is not the same thing. So if you have a parent one here, I don't think I have one in this Jira, right? But if you had a parent relationship, we're not talking the same thing. So you would never want to do that, right? It's always managed up here where you're parent. So what you're really saying is like we would um what you're saying is like, so what happens when we rebrand this, right? What happens when we move the epic up? And so all I would assume is that this relationship gets broken and you have to recreate it in the jar. But let's go test that out. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna open this in a new tab so I can refresh the screen and show you the effect, right? But if I go back to my issue type hierarchy and I create my level again, initiative. One day I'm gonna learn how to spell that word. Initiative. Right, so if I go and add it here, man, my scroll bar is really upsetting me. Hit save changes. This is basically telling me like, hey, you're gonna change the hierarchy and it's gonna break the existing parent. So you just gotta accept that, right? So Katharina, like it just gets broken. And so now you have to redefine it. So if I come back over here, notice that the parent is no longer a thing. And so now I can go and give it a child. But in Jira, if you're not in the jar, establishing the child is a little bit harder. They have since fixed this. I can choose an existing issue now, and I can go back to whatever I had before, mobile 40, mobile 2, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? But now I can recreate my relationships like this. But yeah, it'll basically just break it. Carlos says, how do you advise, if possible, to get critical path in the jar using start and end date? So very good question. Not really something that you can build. So the concept of critical path doesn't really exist in the Jira Advanced Roadmap. Heck, it doesn't even exist in Jira in general. But the closest thing that you can build on critical path is in your fields. This is something we haven't talked about yet, but we're coming up here to the end, so then might as well finish with this. So in your fields, you can bring in your start date and your due date. So I'm going to just bring in my start date and my due date here. I'm going to reorder these. You can reorder them by just grabbing this little grid going up and down, right? And so all you would do is sort, click this little arrow by your dates. And so this is going to give you your critical path. My gosh, this scroll wheel on my mouse is just not happy. Anyways, you're going to get the basically the dates now based on that due date. And so you can sort up or down. And that's the best I can give you based on that critical path, but it's not gonna behave like a Microsoft project critical path. I'm a big proponent of doing it based on priority, but everybody kind of, your mileage will vary. Luigi says, I keep rank if I change priorities with the cloud versions. So here's something that we haven't talked about yet. Well, we kind of did, right? But the rank is very important, right? Because when you're looking at your advanced roadmap here, why does my scroll wheel not work? Okay, so when you're looking at your advanced roadmap and you're re-ranking, because what's really cool about this view is that because you have all the stories, you have all the epics, everything, you can rank everything. And when you're ranking everything, when you start ranking, and I think I broke my rank. Yeah, I broke my rank because now my sort. You got to do your sort by rank over here. When you do this and you push those changes into Jira, everywhere Jira is going to respect the rank. And that's powerful, right? That's very powerful because knowing the order of operations and knowing that order of priority is critical because Jira is going to overlay and push those priorities that rank everywhere. So all the boards are always going to show that most important epic at the top. And it's always going to show that a most important story at the top. And you can visualize all that here from one view as opposed to going to 3 or 4 different projects. Powerful stuff there. Mario says, is there any way to know progress of an initiative based on the epic stories below? Great. I love that you asked that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my filter again over here, go back. Oops. I got to refresh my screen because I broke everything. Here's all that work again. I'm going to bring in these epics again just to kind of fake this again for you over here. So now that we have this, what you're going to want to do is you're going to type in progress. There's one by days and there's one by issue count. I'm going to keep this simple. Just go issue count. And if you do that, you're going to see a progress here based on the children. So yes, it is very much possible based on the statuses of those children. If I hover over this one, you're going to see that I have 3 children. And based on the statuses of my 3 epics, right? Based on these 3 epics here and their current statuses, which are 2 to do, 1 in progress, I'm going to see that I have 2 to do and 1 in progress. And that trickles down, Mario, right? So the epic, based on these children, I am 50% complete. So those are roll upable as well. The other progress one is called days. This one's configurable. So you can, if you're using time tracking, you're going to be able to look at things by day, but days are usually not what teams work off of. So if you go to scheduling and you use story points, you can use the story point button or you can use hours. And then when you go to your plan, you're going to be able to see that progress based on story points. So this will show you how many story points are completed and how many are remaining. So that's very powerful as well. And I like either or, but issue count is easy if you're not using story points nor hours. The story points or hours one is better if you are using those. And I think we have time for one more question here. So some projects are company managed and some are team managed. Can we still use? Yes. So luckily Atlassian's always making changes. It used to be that team managed projects were a no-go. Today they are. So now I can pull in team and company managed into one advanced roadmap, which is revolutionary. It used to suck. It was the worst thing. If you had team managed projects, where basically none of this was possible. And so I'm very thankful that Atlassian is making incremental positive changes every once in a while. And so we now have the ability to basically do this whole logical grouping stuff that we're doing with team and company managed projects. So very happy for that. Victoria, the hours, the story points, it's not tracked in the jar. It's in the issues themselves. So you're using that time tracking and you're using that original estimate. The jar just shows you a roll up of all that information. So folks, that's pretty much it. All the time that we have. I just want to remind you that if you want to take your skills to the next level, make sure you follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always doing something. Like I told you at the beginning, we have the ACP 120 study sessions. I've been doing Jira duty, so I literally take an hour 3 days a week and answer questions. So there's all these kinds of just events and things happening. So if you always want to stay on top of what's going on in the Atlassian ecosystem, make sure you follow me on LinkedIn so you can be aware. Become a member. If you're like, hey, I like this advanced stuff, like, but how do I do this? How do I get some help? Well, I have membership opportunities where for certain fees, you can get 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, couple of hours, whatever you need. There's different tiers so that I can help you out specifically with your problems. I have some free courses on Salto. I have some paid courses on Udemy. I have a merch store with some pretty cool shirts. I have the 2 YouTube channels, so make sure you subscribe to both. And very soon we're going to be doing instructor-led courses, I think in early 2025. So make sure you scan that QR code, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and follow up with all the other cool things that we got going on. Thank you so much for being in this course. I hope you enjoyed it. I am going to be back next week with, I believe it's Jira for Scrum Masters. And then I'm going to be doing a Jira software and JSM together. And then we're going to be looking at Jira for marketers. So lots of courses coming up over the next few weeks. So make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you follow me on LinkedIn so you stay on top of all the things happening. That's it for this one. And we'll see you next week. Bye. Do not play the outro.